Revenge Office Stories. My boss, David, didn't even try to hide his smirk. "We're moving you to the front desk," he announced, the words bouncing around the silent conference room. Consider it a strategic realignment. A couple of my colleagues stared at their shoes, avoiding my eyes, but David just laughed. It was a short, sharp sound that sealed my fate. He thought demoting me to a receptionist was the end of my career. He had no idea he'd just put me in the one place where I could see the fatal flaw in his master plan. From that front desk, I was going to dismantle his entire legacy. It's wild how a career you spend nearly a decade building can be torched in under a minute. For 8 years, I poured my life into Innovate Dynamics. I started as a junior software engineer and, through pure grit and way too many late nights, worked my way up to senior project lead. I wasn't just some employee. I was an architect of our core systems. I'd written code still running our flagship products. I'd trained half the department, and I was the person you called when a problem seemed impossible. My reviews weren't just good, they were glowing. Exceeds expectations was my baseline. I saw the word indispensable more than once, and I loved it. I loved the puzzle, the teamwork, the feeling of creating something that mattered. I believed in the company's mission, or at least I used to. Then David showed up. David Vance was hired from the outside as our new director of engineering. He was the kind of guy who wore his ambition like an expensive, cheap suit, all buzzwords and bravado, capable of talking for an hour without saying a single concrete thing. From day one, we were like oil and water. He saw my deep knowledge of our systems, not as an asset, but as a threat. I was a relic of the old way, a roadblock to his grand vision. My suggestions, based on years of knowing our system's fragile bones, were shot down as lacking a forward-thinking paradigm. My warnings about disastrous integration failures were met with condescending smiles and jabs about not being a team player. The breaking point was Project Chimera. It was David's baby, his masterpiece. The idea was a revolutionary AI platform that he swore would quintuple our efficiency and land us a monster contract with Sterling Atlantic, a giant in the financial world. On paper, it was brilliant. In reality, it was a house of cards built on David's ego. As the lead on the project's core algorithm, I saw the cracks right away. The timeline was insane. The budget was stripped of so-called non-essentials, which apparently included QA testing and, most critically, proper intellectual property vetting. He wanted to stitch together a patchwork of open-source code and our own work without documenting anything or securing the rights, all just to hit his precious launch date. I told him my concerns, professionally and repeatedly. I wrote a 30-page report detailing the security holes, the performance issues, and the massive IP risks. I explained that while our core logic was new and exciting, it was built on a shaky legal and technical foundation. We had to slow down, rebuild parts from scratch, and most importantly, start the patent process for the novel algorithm we'd created. Without a patent, our secret sauce was just an unprotected idea, free for any competitor to copy or even patent themselves. In a one-on-one, I laid it all out. "David," I said, sliding the report across his desk, "if we show this to Sterling Atlantic, we're not just risking the demo. We're risking the company's intellectual property. The algorithm is everything. If we don't protect it, we have nothing." He didn't even open it. He pushed it back at me with 2 fingers like it was toxic. "Look," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "I appreciate your diligence, but you're thinking like a coder, not a visionary. This is about speed to market. We'll circle back to the paperwork after we land the deal." Then he hit me with his favorite line: "Stop creating problems and start finding solutions." Suddenly, I wasn't a problem solver anymore. I was the problem. He started systematically icing me out. My team members were reassigned. My server access was restricted. I was uninvited from meetings for the project I was supposed to be leading. The office whispers got louder. People who once asked for my help now avoided my gaze in the hallway. It was a cold, calculated campaign to break me. The final blow came on a Tuesday morning. I was called into conference room 3. David was there with Carol, the head of HR, who looked permanently apologetic. He launched into a speech about restructuring and optimizing talent. It was a masterclass in corporate nonsense. And then the punchline. As part of this realignment, he said, that smirk playing on his lips, we're moving you to the front desk as our new receptionist. The air conditioner hummed. I just stared, waiting for the joke. It never came. Carol slid a paper across the table. My title, Senior Project Lead, was crossed out. Front Desk Coordinator was typed underneath. I looked at him, my voice barely a whisper. A receptionist? After 8 years. And that's when he laughed. Not a big belly laugh, but a short, cruel bark. A sound of pure victory. Think of it as a chance to work on your people skills, he said, standing up. You were too in the weeds, anyway. Now you can be the friendly face of Innovate Dynamics. Humiliation hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just a demotion. It was a public execution. He was making an example of me. This is what happens when you question David Vance. You get erased. You become the person who answers phones. As I walked out, I saw a box with my things from my old office already waiting for me at the front desk. I could feel every eye on me. David was by the coffee machine, laughing with his cronies, not even looking my way. He'd already forgotten me. He thought he had won. He was so wrong. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning. The first few weeks at the front desk were a masterclass in degradation. Answering phones, signing for packages, greeting visitors with a smile that felt like plastic. The headset was my crown of thorns. Colleagues who once debated code with me now asked for lunch recommendations. Some were kind, offering hushed sympathies when David wasn't around. His followers, though, treated me with a sneering disdain, like I was part of the furniture. David, of course, loved it. He'd make a point of parading clients past my desk. And this is our front desk, he'd boom, gesturing at me. The first friendly face you see. He'd lock eyes with me, daring me to crack. I never did. I just gave him my practice hollow smile and said, "Welcome to Innovate Dynamics." Every condescending look, every menial task, just fed a fire inside me. But it wasn't a hot, reckless anger. It was a cold, patient burn. Humiliation is a powerful fuel, and I decided to channel it. David made a critical mistake. He thought that by putting me at the front desk, he'd made me powerless. He thought he'd put me in a cage. He didn't realize he'd put me in the control tower. The receptionist's desk is the company's central nervous system. Everything flows through it. Every call, every visitor, every package. While David was basking in his own genius, I was quietly mapping the entire company's operations. I saw the couriers from our law firm. I saw the worried-looking auditors heading to the finance department. I logged the frantic calls from suppliers that were patched through to junior engineers because David was always in a meeting. And I handled all of David's mail. This was his second mistake. He was so sure I was irrelevant that he never considered I'd be the one sorting his letters. Tucked between junk mail and magazines was a formal notice from our corporate attorneys about intellectual property disclosure obligations. It was a standard quarterly reminder, urging department heads to document and submit any new inventions. It explicitly warned that failing to do so could mean the company might lose its claim to the IP. Holding that letter, a crazy idea sparked. That night, I dug up the employment contract I'd signed 8 years ago, and there it was buried in dense legalese. Section 12, subsection B. Now, most tech contracts say anything you invent on the job belongs to the company. Period. Mine had that, but with a bizarre and forgotten addendum. It was the kind of thing lawyers probably threw in once and then forgot about. It stated that for the company to claim ownership, it had to formally start the patent process within 90 days of the invention being reduced to practice. Basically, once it was a working concept. If the company was told about an invention and failed to act in that window, the rights would revert to the inventor. It was a loophole, a one-in-a-million crack in the fortress. David, in his rush to be a visionary, hadn't just ignored my warnings. He had actively told me to stop the disclosure process. He had, in effect, started a 90-day countdown clock on his own company's claim to its most valuable asset. And that clock was ticking. The front desk became my spy station. I started a secret log documenting everything. Every email where David dismissed my concerns, I saved. Every time a worried junior engineer came to me, I noted the date and time. I was building a case of willful negligence, brick by brick. But that wasn't enough. I couldn't just expose his failure. I had to build my own success. My nights and weekends became an obsession. On my own computer, in my tiny apartment, I started rebuilding the Chimera algorithm from the ground up. But I did it right. I ripped out the shoddy open source parts and rewrote the core logic to be faster, more stable, and most importantly, entirely original. On my own dime, I consulted with an independent patent attorney, Ms. Albright, who specialized in software IP. "This is incredibly elegant," she said, looking over my code. "It's a novel approach to data processing. It's clean, unique, and yes," she added, "it is absolutely patentable." I called my version Janus, the Roman god of doorways, of endings and beginnings. It seemed fitting. My desk was by the front door, and this patent would be the door to David's end and my new beginning. With Ms. Albright's help, I prepared a provisional patent application. This would lock in an early filing date and give me a year to file the full patent. We documented everything. It was airtight. Back at the office, David was completely consumed by the Sterling Atlantic deal. He saw me answering phones and saw a defeated woman. He had no clue that the USB drive in my purse held an invention light years ahead of his precious Chimera. He had no clue a 90-day window was about to slam shut. He saw a receptionist. He failed to see the executioner hiding in plain sight. The 90-day window was the fuse, and David's ego was the match. As the demo for Sterling Atlantic got closer, the office air grew thick with tension. From my perch at the front desk, I had a perfect view of the slow-motion car crash. I'd hear the junior engineers whispering by the water cooler. They were struggling to build a skyscraper on the faulty foundation I'd warned David about. One of them, a young man named Ben I'd mentored, lingered by my desk one evening. "He won't listen," Ben whispered, his voice tight. "The core sink is unstable. It crashes under heavy load. We told him we need another month. He just said to make it work, and that failure is not an option." I just nodded sympathetically. "I'm sure you're all doing your best," I said, my face a neutral mask. Inside, my resolve hardened into ice. David was marching his team right off a cliff he refused to see. The bomb wasn't just technical, it was legal. I knew the exact day my original algorithm had been reduced to practice. That was day 1 of the 90-day countdown. On day 85, I took a personal day and met with Ms. Albright to review the final patent application for Janus. "Are you sure about this?" she asked, her gaze steady. "Once you file, you're making a claim of ownership. If your company fights this, it could get messy and expensive." "They won't be in a position to fight," I said. "The person in charge has made sure they have no legal ground to stand on. He doesn't even know he's playing a game. Normally, a company would have a strong claim, but David's documented refusal to follow the process in my unusual contract gave me a rare opening. On day 89, I filed the provisional patent application with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. I was now officially the inventor of record for the Janus system, patent pending. The next day, day 90, the deadline for Innovate Dynamics to claim my work under the terms of my contract expired. The bomb wasn't ticking. It was armed. All that was left was for David to light the fuse. The day of the Sterling Atlantic demo arrived. David strutted around the office, slapping backs, radiating a toxic level of confidence. He stopped at my desk to get a visitor badge for the CEO of Sterling Atlantic, a tough-looking man named Marcus Thorne. Big day, David smirked. Try to keep the phones quiet. We need an atmosphere of success. He paused. See? This isn't so bad, is it? A nice, quiet job. No stress. I just gave him my serene, empty smile. Good luck with your presentation, David. I hope it goes exactly as you've planned. The Sterling Atlantic team arrived. I signed them in and pointed them to the war room. The door clicked shut. I knew exactly what was about to happen. Ben had told me the system couldn't handle more than 1,000 data streams. David, in his hubris, had promised 10 times that. He planned to run a live stress test as his grand finale. I pictured David smooth-talking his way through the presentation. And then, for the big finish, he'd initiate the high-volume feed. The ticking was over. It was time for the explosion. And the best part? I wouldn't have to lift a finger. He was going to do it all by himself. For the first hour, all you could hear from the war room was the low murmur of David's voice. Then the murmuring stopped. A heavy, awkward silence followed, the kind of quiet that means something has gone very, very wrong. A junior engineer burst out of the room, his face ghost white, and rushed over to Ben's desk, whispering frantically. I couldn't hear the words, but I could read the pure panic. The war room door cracked open again. It was David. His face was blotchy and red, a sheen of sweat on his forehead. Ben, he hissed, get in here, now. Ben scrambled into the room, but the door didn't fully close. I could hear fragments of the disaster. Unacceptable. That was the deep, stern voice of Marcus Thorne, the Sterling Atlantic CEO. Just a minor glitch, a temporary server lag. That was David, his voice an octave higher than usual. Then, another executive spoke, his voice sharp. It's not lag, Mr. Vance. The system is dropping over 80% of the data packets. It's fundamentally broken. But my bigger concern is this. There was a pause. Our IP team did a preliminary search on the core concepts this morning and found nothing on file. No patents, not even a provisional application. Are you showing us a revolutionary technology that you haven't even protected? What exactly are we supposed to be licensing? Checkmate. I knew the tech would fail. I never dreamed the legal fallout would be so perfect. David's voice was now bordering on panic. The patent strategy is an ongoing proprietary process. Thorne cut him off. Don't insult my intelligence, son. An asset this critical would have a provisional patent filed on day one. You either don't have one or you're incompetent. Either way, this meeting is over. The door swung open. Marcus Thorne strode out, his face a thundercloud, his team trailing behind him. He stopped at my desk to drop off his badge. He looked at me, then at the badge, and back at me with a flicker of shrewd curiosity. Thank you for your hospitality, he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. The office was dead silent. Every eye was on David, who stood motionless in the middle of the floor, his arrogance stripped away, leaving a hollowed-out man in an expensive suit. His cronies were suddenly fascinated by their own shoes. David's head slowly turned, his eyes searching for someone to blame. They landed on Ben. You, he snarled, pointing a trembling finger. This is your fault. You said it was ready. I told you it was unstable. Ben shot back, his fear momentarily lost to indignation. David opened his mouth, but nothing came out, and then his eyes found me. I was still sitting at my desk, my posture perfect, just watching him with an unreadable expression. He saw the receptionist he'd thrown away. But for the first time, I think he also saw a mirror of his own colossal failure. The public humiliation he had engineered for me had boomeranged back on him, 100 times worse. He had laughed when he demoted me. Now, in the dead silence of his own making, nobody was laughing at all. The next 2 days were pure corporate panic. The CEO, Mr. Harrison, was seen stalking the halls, his face grim. The Sterling Atlantic deal wasn't just a lost opportunity, it was a 40% hole in our projected annual revenue. The stock was already taking a nosedive on rumors alone. David was a ghost, shuffling in and out of the CEO's office, looking paler each time. On the third day, I got a meeting invite. The attendees, Mr. Harrison, Carol from HR, a team of company lawyers, and David. The subject, Project Chimera. Next steps. I walked into the top-floor conference room. The mood was funereal. Harrison sat at the head of the table, looking like he'd aged a decade. David was at the far end, staring at nothing. "Thank you for coming," Harrison began. "We are in a crisis. However, Marcus Thorne called me this morning," he said, and I quote, "Your company is a mess, but your receptionist is intriguing." He then sent me a link. Harrison clicked a button, and the USPTO website lit up the big screen. There, in black and white, was my provisional patent. Provisional patent application hashtag 63/555-212. System and method for asynchronous data synthesis. Inventor, my name. Filing date, day 89. The room went silent. The lawyers leaned forward. David finally looked up, his face a mask of disbelief. "You," he whispered. I placed a folder on the table. "That's correct, Mr. Harrison," I said, my voice steady. "That is my invention. I call it Janus." One of the lawyers cleared his throat. "Any invention created by an employee is the property of Innovate Dynamics." "Ordinarily, yes," I said, sliding a copy of my employment contract across the table. "According to the highly unusual section 12, subsection B. The company's claim is contingent on starting the patent process within 90 days. I also have," I said, sliding another document over, "the time-stamped email chain from 92 days ago where Mr. Vance explicitly told me to stop all work on IP protection." The lawyer read it. His eyebrows shot up. He looked at David. David just sat there, mute. David's negligence created a situation where I had to work on my own time, with my own resources. I continued. "Janus is not Chimera. It shares no code with the system that failed on Monday. It is my own work, and legally, thanks to that forgotten clause in David's actions, it is my property." Harrison stared at me, then at David with cold fury, and then back at me with something like awe. "So what happens now?" he asked. "Marcus Thorne and I had a very productive chat," I said. "Sterling Atlantic is prepared to offer an exclusive licensing deal. A very, very lucrative one. The kind that will save this company." A flicker of hope crossed Harrison's face. "The terms?" I threw out a number that felt impossible, a dream. "First, I'm forming my own company. Innovate Dynamics will license Janus exclusively through me. The fee will be $10 million up front, plus a 7% royalty on all gross revenue from the tech." The lawyers gasped, but in their panic, Harrison didn't even flinch. "Second," I continued, "a full, independent audit of the engineering department, overseen by a firm of my choosing." Finally, I looked right at David. "And third, he's fired. Today. For cause citing gross negligence. No severance, no golden parachute. He'll be escorted from the building." The room was silent. David stared at me with pure hatred. Mr. Harrison looked at the lawyers, then at David's pathetic, broken form. Then he looked at me, the woman holding the winning lottery ticket. He took a deep breath. Agreed. To all of it. My vindication was in the frantic energy of the lawyers whispering about contracts. It was in the look of shock on David's face as he was asked for his ID badge. And it was knowing I hadn't just gotten revenge. I had used the system he tried to crush me with, and I had won. The fallout was immediate. Just as I demanded, security escorted David out that afternoon. I watched from the window of what was now my temporary office as he was led to the curb. He never looked back. The licensing deal was signed within the week. The $10 million wire transfer was so staggering it didn't feel real. Innovate Dynamics, powered by my Jana system, not only recovered but landed the largest contract in its history. The audit I ordered cleaned house, and Ben, the terrified junior engineer, was promoted to a lead position. He deserved it. I never went back to being an employee. I became their most critical and most expensive business partner. I was the ghost in their machine, the architect of their success. The money was life-changing, but the real prize was freedom. The freedom to create without a David standing in the way. My story is a reminder to never, ever underestimate the person you think you've beaten. The world is full of people who are overlooked and pushed aside. But while arrogance makes a lot of noise, true power lies in patience and quiet competence. My boss laughed because he thought my value was tied to my job title. He didn't understand that your value is what you can create. He tried to put me in a box, but all he did was give me the space to build a new world for myself, one he could never enter. And in the end, that was the best revenge of all. Thank you for listening. If you've ever felt underestimated or had to deal with a toxic boss, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. And if you enjoyed this, please consider liking and subscribing for more stories of corporate checkmates and satisfying revenge. Don't let anyone dim your light. Sometimes the darkest moments are just setting the stage for your brightest comeback.